The shoe brands flooding your feed paid for that spot. Every influencer unboxing, every sponsored find, every viral haul bought and placed. The 5 brands on this list paid for nothing. No PR, no gifting, no campaign. They just built a genuinely good shoe, priced it honestly, and let nurses, teachers, and retail workers on 12-hour shifts spread the word the old way. 5 brands hiding in plain sight on the shelf, nobody photographs. The first one sounds like it belongs in a pharmacy. That's exactly why you've been walking past it. Number 5. Dr. Scholl's shoes. Dr. Scholl's has spent so many decades associated with drugstore insoles and foot powder that almost nobody thinks to look for it as an actual standalone footwear brand with its own design team, its own seasonal collections, and its own construction philosophy entirely separate from the insert aisle most shoppers associate the name with. It sits on its own rack with its own construction philosophy. Separate entirely from the insert aisle, the name still conjures in most people's minds the instant they hear it mentioned in conversation. That association is precisely the reason this brand gets ignored. The name does not communicate fashion. It communicates a clinical, slightly unglamorous foot care function, the kind of word you associate with a pharmacy display, rather than a shoe department where you are hoping to find something current. The shopper scanning a shoe wall for something that looks current and on-trend skips right past it without registering that the brand behind the name has been quietly building actual shoes for years, refining the same comfort engineering across multiple product generations. That construction uses the same comfort-first engineering philosophy that made the insert business successful in the first place, just applied to a complete shoe rather than to an aftermarket accessory bought separately and dropped in later. The Dr. Scholl's original collection, the Madison and the No Limits lines specifically, use a memory foam footbed system layered directly into the shoe's construction, rather than relying on a removable insert sold separately at a different price point entirely. That means the cushioning is engineered as a structural part of the shoe from day one, baked into the original pattern. Instead of being treated as an optional add-on, the customer has to purchase and install herself after the fact, on top of whatever stock insole the shoe originally shipped with. This distinction matters considerably more than it sounds. A shoe designed around its cushioning from the first pattern draft behaves differently underfoot than a shoe with a thin stock insole that simply has room for an aftermarket cushion to be dropped in later, almost as an apology for the original design. The weight distribution, the flex point of the sole, and the way the upper material is cut all change once cushioning is treated as a foundational design requirement rather than an afterthought solved with a generic insert, purchased separately at a pharmacy counter. The outsole construction uses a flexible rubber compound with a tread pattern engineered specifically for all-day standing and walking rather than for runway photography or a single afternoon of light errands around town on a Saturday. This is precisely why the brand has quietly become a favorite among service industry workers, retail staff, and healthcare workers who spend entire shifts on hard flooring and need a shoe that performs under that specific kind of sustained stress, hour after hour without complaint. A shoe that simply looks good, standing still in a fitting room mirror, is solving an entirely different problem than a shoe that needs to survive 10 hours on a concrete hospital floor without leaving the wearer's feet aching by hour 6, let alone hour 10. There is also a quieter detail in the brand's sizing approach that rarely gets discussed outside of comfort shoe forums. Several Dr. Scholl's silhouettes are built on a slightly wider last than the industry standard, which matters considerably for the percentage of women whose foot shape simply does not match the narrow, tapered last most fashion-forward brands default to. A wider last is not a design compromise. It is a structural decision that reduces pressure on the bunion joint and the smallest toe, two of the most common pain points reported by women standing for long shifts. Brands that charge a premium for wide width as a separate, upcharged category are solving the same problem Dr. Scholl's has simply built into its standard sizing from the start, without treating it as an add-on feature worth charging extra for. The pricing strategy reinforces the brand's quiet, almost apologetic market position. Dr. Scholl's has never positioned itself as a fashion-forward purchase the way several competitors on this list occasionally attempt to, which means it has never developed the marketing infrastructure, the seasonal lookbooks, the influencer outreach budget that would put it in front of a shopper who was not already specifically looking for foot comfort over everything else. At $35 to $60, Dr. Scholl's delivers a comfort engineering standard that several brands charging $80 to $120 for comparable memory foam and flexible outsole technology have not meaningfully exceeded in independent wear testing conducted by consumer review platforms over multiple wear cycles. The brand's biggest obstacle is not its formula or its construction. It is the name itself, sitting on a shoe wall, quietly underselling everything the shoe is actually capable of doing for the person who finally tries it on and discovers what the rest of the aisle has been hiding from her. The next brand has a name that sounds like it belongs to your grandmother's closet, and the construction underneath that unfashionable reputation has not gotten the credit it has consistently earned for nearly a century of continuous production. Number 4. LifeStride. LifeStride has been manufacturing women's footwear since 1958, which places it among the longest continuously operating women's comfort shoe brands in the American market, predating most of its current competitors by multiple decades of accumulated construction experience. And yet, it rarely appears in a single fashion roundup, comfort shoe ranking, or social media haul, almost as if the brand's own longevity has worked against its visibility rather than in favor of it, treated as a relic rather than a proven track record. The brand built its reputation specifically around the working woman's wardrobe. The professional flat, the low pump, the loafer that needed to transition from a morning commute to an 8-hour shift on her feet without requiring a second pair tucked into a tote bag for relief later in the day, the way so many other professional shoes have historically demanded. That specific and unglamorous use case, dependable all-day comfort in a professional silhouette, does not generate the kind of viral content that drives modern footwear discovery in an attention economy built around novelty and drama. A shoe that simply does its job quietly for an entire workday does not produce a satisfying unboxing video or a dramatic before and after transformation reel. And that absence of content-friendly drama has left LifeStride sitting in a strange retail purgatory, neither niche enough to be discovered nor flashy enough to be promoted. It is too established and too unexciting for the trend-driven shopper, and too undermarketed for the comfort-focused shopper who has never had a reason to encounter the name outside of a department store clearance rack tucked toward the back of the building, past the seasonal displays that get all the foot traffic. The construction tells a different story than the visibility does once you actually take the shoe off the rack and examine it directly rather than walking past it. LifeStride's wide retail footprint, sold through department stores and value retailers that themselves carry little fashion cachet, has compounded the brand's visibility problem in a way that is almost circular. A brand discovered at a discount department store, rather than a dedicated shoe boutique, inherits the perceived status of the retailer carrying it, regardless of what is actually stitched into the shoe. That perception gap is precisely why a LifeStride flat sitting next to a designer-adjacent brand on the same discount rack gets dismissed by association, even when a direct construction comparison would favor LifeStride on stitching, sole bonding, and footbed integration. The shoe is being judged by its neighbors on the shelf rather than by what it is actually made of. LifeStride's signature comfort technology, branded across the line as soft system cushioning, uses a multi-layer footbed combining a gel or foam cushioning core with a fabric lining engineered for moisture management across a full day of wear in any season. That combination is one that several premium comfort brands charging twice the price use as their primary marketing hook, without delivering a meaningfully different underfoot experience once both shoes are actually worn side by side for a full working day, rather than judged in a 30-second store try-on under fluorescent lighting. The leather and synthetic upper options across the brand's range are constructed with a stitched, rather than purely adhesive bonded, attachment at the sole in the majority of the catalog, a meaningful construction distinction that most shoppers never think to check before purchasing. That construction choice gives LifeStride shoes a structural durability and a resoling potential that the fast fashion and ultra-budget brands several tiers below it on the price spectrum simply cannot offer once the original sole eventually wears through from regular use across months of daily rotation. The brand's catalog also reflects a practical understanding of how working women actually dress across a full year, with seasonally appropriate boot and closed-toe options that maintain the same comfort engineering found in the brand's signature flats, rather than treating cold-weather footwear as a separate, lesser-engineered category the way several competitors do. At $45 to $75, LifeStride is delivering a construction standard and a cushioning technology that brands like Naturalizer and Clarks, both of which have earned considerably more mainstream recognition for very similar engineering, charge a comparable or higher price to access through their own more visible retail channels. The shopper who finds LifeStride is not discovering a lesser product hiding at a lower price. She is discovering a product that simply never had a marketing department aggressive enough to tell her it was there in the first place, sitting quietly on the same shelf for decades, while louder names captured the attention instead. If this list is making you reconsider the shoe wall you usually walk straight past, hit the like button and subscribe right now. Number 3. Easy Spirit. Easy Spirit entered the market in 1987 with a single, specific engineering promise. A shoe genuinely comfortable enough to walk in from the moment it left the box, a claim that sounded almost radical at the time it was first made. That promise meant no painful break-in period, which defined most women's footwear at the time, dress shoes included, where a new pair almost guaranteed a blister or two before the leather finally softened to the shape of your foot over weeks of forced wear. The brand built its entire early identity around proving that promise through actual biomechanical research rather than a slogan alone, partnering with podiatric specialists in a way that was genuinely unusual for accessible footwear at the time and remains relatively rare even now. That research-driven foundation has not disappeared from the current product, even though the brand's visibility has faded considerably compared to the cultural moment it had in the late 80s and early 90s when the name was practically inescapable. Its commercials promoting the walking comfort promise were genuinely ubiquitous during that period, and the brand felt, for a time, like a serious competitor to the athletic giants in the comfort walking category specifically, a position few accessible women's brands have held before or since. That cultural visibility has faded with each passing decade, even as the engineering underneath the shoes themselves has continued to hold up against newer, louder competitors entering the same category with considerably larger advertising budgets behind them. The Romy and the travel timelines use an anatomically contoured footbed developed in direct consultation with podiatric specialists, a footbed shape that supports the natural arch and heel strike pattern, rather than relying purely on a flat cushioned layer applied uniformly across every size. Several less specialized comfort brands rely on exactly that flat cushioned approach, treating comfort as a single uniform layer rather than a shape engineered around how a foot actually moves through a stride from heel to toe. That contoured support structure is the same fundamental approach that podiatrists developed premium walking brands, charging considerably more money use as their primary selling point in their own marketing materials and in-store displays. Easy Spirit has been quietly applying a comparable engineering philosophy across its accessible price range for decades, without updating its marketing to remind a new generation of shoppers that the research behind the brand was never actually retired, simply allowed to fade from public memory. The outsole technology across the brand's walking-specific lines incorporates a rocker-style sole profile in several models, a design engineered to reduce the muscular effort required for each step across a long day of walking. That rocker profile guides the foot's natural rolling motion from heel strike through to toe off, a feature that premium walking and recovery shoe brands market as a significant innovation while charging $80 to $140 for the privilege of accessing it through a more visible retail presence. At $40 to $65, Easy Spirit is delivering Podiatric informed construction and a rocker sole walking technology that several brands several times its price point treat as their entire premium justification for existing in that higher tier at all. The brand's comparative obscurity today has nothing to do with the engineering inside the shoe, and everything to do with a marketing budget that simply has not kept pace with newer, louder entrants into the comfort footwear conversation over the past 2 decades of evolving retail attention. It is worth noting that Easy Spirit's ownership has changed hands multiple times since its founding, eventually folding into a larger footwear conglomerate that also manages several other heritage comfort brands. That kind of corporate consolidation usually signals a quiet decline in formula investment, the exact pattern that hurt Nine West's construction quality after its own bankruptcy restructuring. Easy Spirit is a rare exception to that pattern. Independent comparisons between older and newer production runs show the Podiatric informed last and the rocker sole technology have remained largely intact through the ownership changes, even as the marketing budget supporting the brand shrank considerably. The engineering survived the corporate shuffle. The advertising spend did not, and that imbalance is exactly why the brand sits this far down most shoppers' radar today. The next brand built its entire reputation through word of mouth in a specific professional community before the broader shopping public ever caught on, and the construction quality that earned that loyalty has remained almost entirely unchanged, while the brand's prices have stayed remarkably honest across the years. Number 2. White Mountain. White Mountain occupies one of the strangest and most underappreciated positions in accessible women's footwear, a position built almost entirely on quiet repeat loyalty rather than any broader marketing push. It has a genuine cult following among a specific group of loyal repeat buyers, almost no broader cultural visibility outside of that group, and a construction standard that, once examined directly, makes that gap between reputation and reality genuinely difficult to explain away. The brand has built its identity specifically around suede and leather construction in classic, slightly retro silhouettes, the kind of clog, bootie, and loafer that does not chase a seasonal trend cycle the way so many competing brands feel obligated to. That refusal to chase trends means the brand does not generate the kind of viral, time-sensitive content that drives most footwear discovery in the current retail environment, where a new must-have silhouette needs to appear every few weeks to keep an audience engaged and scrolling. A shoe that looked good 5 years ago and still looks good today does not create the same urgency-driven engagement that a brand releasing a new must-have silhouette every 6 weeks generates across social platforms built on novelty. That design philosophy, while genuinely good for the customer's wardrobe and wallet over the long run, has worked directly against the brand's visibility in an industry that rewards novelty over consistency at almost every level of its promotional strategy. The construction uses genuine suede and leather uppers at a rate that significantly exceeds what most brands offer at a comparable price point, where synthetic leather substitutes are far more common once the price drops below $70. White Mountain's commitment to real leather and suede across the majority of its range, rather than reserving genuine materials for a small premium subset of the catalog, is a sourcing decision that directly affects how the shoe ages over years of regular wear. Leather develops the kind of patina and longevity that synthetic alternatives simply cannot replicate, softening and taking on character with wear rather than cracking and peeling the way a lower-grade synthetic eventually does after a single season. Suede, similarly, maintains a texture and structural integrity across years of wear that cheaper synthetic suede substitutes lose within a single season of regular use, going matted and patchy where genuine suede simply continues to age gracefully and predictably. The brand's customer base skews toward repeat buyers in a way that is genuinely unusual for accessible footwear, with a meaningful share of White Mountain sales coming from customers replacing a worn-out pair of the exact same style years later, rather than buying something new. That pattern, visible in the brand's own reorder data, referenced in several trade publications, is one of the strongest indirect signals of customer satisfaction available, stronger in some ways than a star rating, because it reflects a purchase decision made with full knowledge of how the shoe performs over years, rather than over a single trial wear. The footbed construction across the brand's signature clog and booty lines includes a contoured, cushioned insole built directly into the shoe, rather than relying purely on a flat stock liner stamped out for every size uniformly. That gives the shoe a genuine all-day comfort profile that belies its relatively modest price point, and its almost complete absence from mainstream footwear marketing and editorial coverage, where it is rarely, if ever, mentioned by name. At $50 to $90, White Mountain is delivering genuine leather and suede construction with integrated comfort cushioning that several brands charging considerably more do not consistently match once the materials are compared directly side by side. Those higher-priced brands have the marketing budget to be in every seasonal roundup and every influencer's closet tour, a visibility advantage that has nothing to do with what is actually stitched into the shoe itself once you look past the campaign surrounding it. Subscribe right now before we get to number 1. Because the final brand on this list did something almost no other accessible footwear company has managed. It built a genuine cult, following loyal enough to keep the brand alive through retail bankruptcy, liquidation, and relaunch. And the construction quality that earned that loyalty has remained the one constant through all of it. Number 1. Payless's legacy and its modern successor, Comfortview Payless Shoe Source, closed its remaining American stores in 2019, a collapse that received considerably more news coverage than almost any retail closure in the footwear category that decade, a level of attention that surprised even people who had not thought about the brand in years. It received that level of coverage precisely because the brand had served a customer base that the rest of the industry had spent decades treating as an afterthought. The budget-conscious shopper who still wanted genuine variety, reasonable construction, and a fitting room experience rather than a purely transactional purchase. That fitting room experience mattered more than it might sound. It meant a real, physical alternative to a purely transactional, no-frills purchase. The kind of shopping trip where you could actually try the shoe on before committing your limited budget to it. What almost nobody noticed in the wake of that closure is that the formula Payless built its identity around did not disappear from the market entirely. Accessible pricing without a corresponding collapse in basic construction standards is a formula, not a single brand name, and formulas tend to survive even when the company holding them does not. It migrated, quietly and without the fanfare of a relaunch campaign, into a smaller cluster of accessible footwear lines that absorbed both the manufacturing relationships and the design philosophy the original brand had spent decades refining across thousands of stores. Comfortview and several private label comfort lines sold through catalog and online-first retailers picked up almost exactly where the shuttered storefronts left off, inheriting both the supply chain knowledge and the customer base that had nowhere else familiar to go after the closures. The construction logic that made the original brand a genuine value proposition, rather than simply a cheap one, centered on a specific and disciplined approach that prioritized function over flash at every stage of production. It meant spending the limited per-unit budget on the components that actually determine how a shoe performs over its functional life. The sole bonding method, the footbed cushioning, the heel counter structure, the parts a shopper rarely thinks to inspect before buying. That allocation came at the direct expense of the upper materials and decorative details that drive an impulse purchase decision in a store, but contribute almost nothing to how the shoe actually holds up after the first month of regular wear and use across a typical week. That same prioritization logic is visible today in the construction of Comfortview's core comfort flat and walking shoe lines, carried forward almost as a kind of institutional memory from the original Payless manufacturing relationships. A cushioned, contoured footbed and a properly reinforced heel counter are present even in the brand's lowest price tier, a deliberate allocation of cost that several competing ultra-budget brands skip entirely in favor of a flashier presentation. Those competing brands, instead, spend that same money on a flashier, more photogenic upper that collapses within weeks of actual wear, prioritizing the photo on the listing page over the shoe's actual performance once it leaves the box and meets the pavement. At $20 to $45, the legacy of accessible, genuinely wearable construction that built Payless into a multi-decade institution before its closure has not actually vanished from the market, regardless of how few shoppers realize it. It simply stopped having a flagship name attached to it loud enough for most shoppers to notice, fading into a handful of quieter successor brands instead of remaining concentrated under one recognizable storefront with a national footprint. The brand that arguably built the entire modern category of affordable, decently constructed women's footwear is, in its successor form, now one of the most overlooked gold mines in the entire accessible shoe market, sitting in plain sight under a name almost nobody thinks to search for. The footwear industry's marketing ecosystem is not designed to direct you toward the most genuinely comfortable, best constructed shoe for the lowest price available on the market today. It is designed to direct you toward the shoe that generates the highest margin and the most cultural visibility for the brands funding that ecosystem in the first place, which is a fundamentally different objective from serving your feet well across a long day. Pick up whatever shoes you are wearing right now, check the sole construction, check whether the cushioning is built into the shoe or simply dropped in as an afterthought, the way so many brands treat it once the marketing budget has already been spent elsewhere. That single comparison is the entire distance between the brand that found you through a marketing budget and the brand that deserved to find you through what it actually put into the shoe, quietly, without ever asking for the credit. Click the next video right now. What we found there goes even deeper into the brands the industry would rather you never compared side by side, and the gap between price and quality is even harder to explain away once you see it laid out directly.